So thank you for coming along to the data-driven theatre for this presentation. I'm talking about business value focused data strategy, which is probably why this room's quite so full. In 2003, Michael Lewis wrote a book called Moneyball, The Art of Winning an Unfair Game. That book was turned into a movie in 2011 starring Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill. Me. Sound guy, audio guy. Right, let's try that again. So I was talking about Michael Lewis, who wrote a book called Moneyball, The Art of Winning an Unfair Game. That book was turned into a film, and in the book, Lewis recounts how Billy Beane, who was the general manager for a baseball team called Oakland Athletics, changed the sport of baseball for good, transformed baseball for good, using analytics and a data-guided approach to how he ran his team and how he created his team. So Beane had this hypothesis that the traditional methods for choosing a team, buying players, selling players, valuing players, selecting players was deeply flawed. And it used the collective wisdom of sort of baseball insiders like scouts and coaches and players and managers to make some decisions about who they should buy, what players they should look at, how they should construct a team on match day. What Billy Beane suggested was that the measures that we use to gauge how well a player would perform and how good they are, such as stolen bases, batting averages, how many runs batted in, wasn't relevant in the modern game anymore. And that team coaches who relied on this sort of collective wisdom and gut feel and experience to make the decisions was no longer relevant. And what he wanted to do was come up with a new way of not using intuition and gut feel, but using a more statistical approach to how he created his team. So the other big factor in Beane's thinking was that they're actually a woefully underperforming team, and they also had limited cash. So he needed to come up with another way. He couldn't compete with the big boys like the New York Yankees. He needed to look at a way that would help him build and buy a team that would get some success. So he devised a new set of measures to assess the performance of players, but used metrics that were deeply undervalued on the market so that the players that he could find were very cheap, but that predicted that they would be very well performing if he constructed the team in the right way. So it was a great method for him to go out to the market, find some new players, and put a team together that everyone thought he was crazy, but he knew that these underlying metrics would enable them to create a team that would be more successful. Now, he rolled this out, and in the first season, going from a really underperforming team, he managed to get to the playoffs, and he repeated that in the following year. And nobody could understand how this was possible. And the impact of this system was so big that all baseball teams rolled out something similar. He was tried to be poached by other clubs to roll this method out. And he changed baseball for good. The term Moneyball is now sort of in the lexicon of baseball and sport to represent using statistical methods to drive performance improvement. So if we fast forward to today, so that was back in sort of 2002, 2003, this kind of data approach is being used in similar ways to disrupt whole industries. Now, I'm in a room full of data folk, so that's probably not news to anyone. But what we're seeing today is these leading companies are accelerating their growth at a rapid pace because they were, like the Oakland Athletics team, they deployed data insights and a data-guided approach to how they run their business to hugely potent effect. Now, these companies have been built with data at their core to run their business, to create new products and services, to create new business models, and their valuations are massive. Facebook made $55 billion from advertising revenue in 2008 because of its data about people. Spotify has almost 250 million monthly users because of its ability to know what kind of music we might want and to curate music that we want to listen to. Google has us making 2 trillion searches a year because it knows what we want to look for and it helps us to get to that more quickly. Established organizations of today, people in this room and outside, that haven't been built with data in their fabric are really needing to look at themselves and consider how do they transform their organization around data that help them accelerate their missions, their shareholder value, their strategies, or risk being obsolete or forgotten. And a data strategy has an important part to play in helping organizations to reduce the impact of this disruption or become the disruptor themselves or just move the needle forward, whatever it is that an organization is trying to achieve. Okay, so let's imagine there is an organization that has part of its business strategy to pivot from being a very product-focused and product-centric organization to one that is very customer-focused in how it thinks and it operates. So instead of what products should we sell and which channels should we sell them through, much more about who are our customers, what are their needs, and how as an organization do we pivot around that and create what the customer wants. Now for some, that is a huge transformational shift, having spent years building, creating new products and pushing them out into the market. And that transformational shift relies on a really strong insight into knowing the customer base so that you can be more customer-centric with how you approach it. From a data strategy perspective, that's the starting point for focusing on business value and driving towards positive outcomes, which is all around aligning your data and your business strategy together. That sounds like a bit of a no-brainer when you say it out loud, but we still go into many organizations who just totally forget this part. They totally forget to align what they're trying to achieve from a data perspective with what they're trying to achieve from a business perspective. So lesson 1. With any strategy, So with any new strategy, you should test your equipment first. No, with any new strategy or new business or change program, what's essential is to understand why you're doing what you're doing. What's your North Star that guides everything else that you're trying to change? So for Cynozure, our mission is to create a better future for all through the positive and open use of data. And that mission statement underpins everything else that we do. So any decision we make internally, does it match and meet our purpose and our vision statement? And for data, it's the same, particularly in a space where, despite all the hype and 7,000 people coming into a room in one day, people are still apprehensive to invest. They're unclear of the benefits. They're skeptical of the outcomes. So having a real clear statement that tells you where you're going is really important. What will you say to the CEO if you bump into her in the lift or by the photocopier? If she says, what's our strategy for data? What's the point? What are we trying to do? What job do you have? You need that statement that really helps articulate what it is that you're trying to achieve. So it starts off with having this vision for what you're trying to do, that elevator pitch that people can understand. So how many people have something along these kind of lines in your top level business strategy, up there with sort of shareholder return, grow internationally, create new products and services? Who has a statement like this? Okay, who has a statement like this in their data strategy, so that their data strategy is to be these things? Okay, I expected lots of hands to go up, and I did, so I'm probably going to disappoint you. I hate these. I hate these as vision statements. And I hate them as vision statements because they're buzzwords. They're industry-created straplines. They're headlines in the press. They're ambiguous. They open more questions than they answer in terms of a vision of what you're trying to achieve. I also think they're a bit lazy. I think they're kind of what data people say to satisfy non-data people about what it is that you want to try and do. Or conversely, it's what non-data people say to make it look like they want to do some data stuff, become data-driven. I think this is strategy without meaning. And what we really need is strategy with a meaning, a vision that in a short sentence or two explains what this data thing is all about in your organization and how you're going to do it. Something that highlights the priorities and therefore implies also what you're not going to do, which is just as important as what you are going to do. Something that highlights the business thing that you're going to impact. Now, all these vision statements explain the business outcome. So creating unbeatable customer experiences, creating amazing relationships and supplier and partnerships and relationships with our partners, creating a world-class team that has high performance. These are things that we can really understand and get behind. They get to the heart of the strategy and the business strategy really quickly. If I give you an example from an insurance client that we had. So we went to an insurance organization and they were really confused about what they were trying to achieve with data. On one hand, they've got regulatory compliance concerns, and on the other hand, they want to write good insurance, they want to write good business, they want to get good pricing. And they had separate teams doing regulations, separate teams doing underwriting type insurance analysis and data, and there was constant competition about who's more important, what's more important, which one should we do, which one shouldn't we do. And the answer was they needed to do both, but they needed to decide which was most important. And what they decided was that commercial value was most important, but also whilst they were satisfying regulatory obligations. And just by having a vision statement that said both those things, and it put commercial gain first, made it really clear to the organisation what they needed to do, and it helped us then define a strategy that put everyone under that vision statement. Even better than that one-liner, and this is, so formatting's gone a bit funny since we've switched, but even better than that one-liner, or to add more flavour and context, you can use this what, why, how, so that structure, as it helps explain what you will do, for what benefit, through which action, to drive a better outcome for the business. It's a really powerful way of articulating at a macro level what the strategy is all about. Now here we want to share data across a department, treat a customer as an individual that has multiple touch points, to drive more engagement and purchases, and being there for the customer through cross-selling of services by observing, analysing and activating one business so that we can create customer value and act as one organisation rather than acting in silos. Quite wordy, maybe lots of buzzwords, but in relatively short statement it really explains for this fictitious company what it is that they're trying to achieve. So this powerful combination of flipping the way you think about your vision for data, so rather than it being about the data stuff, you make it about the business stuff, and putting the customer first and deploying data sort of for business, organisation or societal value starts with understanding what will work for your organisation. So fundamentally, creating a business that is guided and informed by data at its heart is about applying data to help deliver your existing or planned business strategy, or help set that strategy, and then identifying use cases under that vision that can have really big impact. And I know that's really mesmerizing. So what do we mean by use case? Let me give you some examples. So as a retailer, I might look at demand planning and forecast accuracy. So that helps me understand the makeup of actual demand. So if I can understand actual demand, I might be able to better predict future demand. Makes sense. As a distributor or a logistics company, I may want to optimize my delivery route so that I can send trucks and lorries to the right places at the right time in the most efficient route to keep my petrol costs down, to better schedule my drivers and the routes and the scheduling of what things that we drop off and when. As a marketing director in any organisation, I might want to understand what are the purchase patterns and the customer journeys that people take up to the point that they land at my site and then move on to purchase or not purchase, so that I can better allocate my marketing spend across those channels and not invest in marketing channels that don't deliver me any return. As a contact centre manager, I might want to take all of the calls that come into the call centre, convert that into text so that I can look at the topics and intent of calls so that I can better understand, train up my workforce, have the right people answering the right calls. As an e-commerce digital director, I might want to personalise the online experience based on attributes of a customer, the context of that customer, where they came from, what they bought before. As a telecommunications business, I might want to deploy intelligent search or chatbots that use AI, that learn behaviour, so that we can improve search that help make successful customer journeys. Again, as a retailer, I may want a recommendation engine that understands personas and people and what they've done and what they do, and make relevant recommendations for products and services based on purchase, browse, online behaviour, whatever it might be. As a product vendor, it could be about increasing the buying channels for customers so that they can buy your products and services and create a search capability on Alexa. As a council leader, if we've got any public sector people in the room, it's better matching the supply of your services and allocation of resources with the demand for those services. As a market leader, you might be in an organisation that has very good visibility of what's happening in your space, who's buying what, who's selling what, who's partnered with what. You might be able to package that data up and sell it back to the market and become a data aggregator and data provider out to your business. As a charity, you might want to identify who's most likely to support us as a charity, or who's most likely to provide us some cash and donations that we can put to good use. This list of use cases is endless, and I could go on. And one of the things we also see is that people forget to set these use cases. They forget to define what it is they're trying to do and for what business benefit, what outcome they're trying to do. Often think about dashboards or reports and not what you're actually going to do and what you're actually going to change off the back of it. So essentially the game here is to identify what will be most valuable to your organisation, align to what you're trying to achieve, and base your data strategy around those things. Doing that, along with having really clear vision statement that I talked about earlier, is the number one best way of having a strategy that is focused on business value. Starting in this way from a really early stage means you can also articulate to the organisation, what's this data thing all about? and make it about trying to achieve what the business wants to achieve and not what you as a data person or a data team or data collective is trying to achieve. Now, the other consideration is on culture. Now, there's loads in like sort of top-level commentary in the market and advice that says create a data-driven culture. I had a slide on it, and that culture is the biggest blocker or enabler in an organisation to really get value here, which lots of nods around the room we all know to be true. I mentioned earlier that I don't like create a data-driven culture as a vision statement, as it's not tangible enough. It doesn't attach to anything for non-data people or for the organisation to achieve. Equally, the connotations of a data-driven culture feels like you're being pushed, you're being driven to do something. And I much prefer, and you may argue that I'm sort of splitting hairs here, that it's about creating a business culture that uses data to help with decisions. It's a really small flip, and it's a small shift in mindset, but it's a much better way of thinking about the way you go after this data thing. Culture, as we know, is difficult to change. It takes a long time, and you can't always control the outcomes of initiatives that aim to drive culture shift. So you might put some things in play that try and drive a culture one way, and you lose it a bit. But you can do that if you put the right strategy and the right plan in place, and that then gives you a shooting chance, and then deploy that strategy and pivot accordingly based on what you see. So a strategy or a vision without a plan is just an idea. A plan without actually doing something is, I don't know, like a Gantt chart or a Trello board. Equally, an action without a vision is probably a nightmare, or at least people don't know what you're doing and why you're doing it, and you may not get investment beyond your first project. So the way we see true culture change happen, and culture change happen, and culture change that we want, most importantly, and that's aligned to our overarching business aims, is a cycle of ongoing change and adjustments. It's about centering on important outcomes, which I've talked about. It's about picking the use cases that matter, really important two takeaways. It's about analysing and activating data to make some informed and guided decisions, seeing how that performs, learning from it and going again, and then communicating and celebrating success and failure on an ongoing basis on a cycle. This is not a one-hit project. There's nothing more powerful to nudging the understanding internally, getting buy-in from senior business leaders, or having that aha moment, people finally get what it's about, than being able to show and clearly articulate positive outcomes. The detail of what and how you do it becomes a bit less important when you can prove that you're doing something that delivers results. The culture shift and that cycle can't just happen, though. So it really needs to be underpinned and guided by a well-thought-through strategy, an achievable and iterative plan. Maybe stretch, but needs to be achievable. A data strategy, by our definition, is a framework that delivers business value through the application of data and analytics. That framework has 6 pillars, and all elements need to be considered in a plan. Missing any one of these, it's a bit like a Formula One pit stop. If one of the people in that pit stop doesn't happen, then the Lewis Hamilton can't drive away. Same with this. We need to think about all of these things in context and have a plan and an action against all of them, otherwise the strategy falls over. And once you've written down your data strategy, that in its own right can be used as a tool to really explain what it is you're trying to achieve, and most importantly, how you're going to get there and what you need to do in the meantime. So I've talked quite a lot about vision and value. Clearly, we need to build a team that has the skills and capabilities and responsibilities and an organisational structure that supports what you're trying to achieve. You need to have these cultural assessment in place and a culture change plan in place. We need to have an operating model, a bit of a grand way of saying ways of working, an approach of how people will work together. We need to clearly talk about technology and the architecture that sits on that technology. We need to have really good governance around how we get data in, how we look after it. Data governance, for me, is about building trust. It's about building trust in your data, that people believe it, they know it's right, they know it's secure. So data governance is about building trust. And then this roadmap is about putting a practical plan in place of all the things that we've said we need to do in these other pillars in a timeline so people can see what we need to do and when. And importantly, show that we're not going to do everything overnight and that we're going to iterate improvements and iterate towards our end goal. So final couple of points before I leave you and before the laptop breaks again. I've used the term data guided quite a lot. Now, in the industry, and I'm not the first to say that, but in the industry, most people talk about data driven. And I strongly believe that our future and our businesses and our organizations are guided, not driven by data. Data and AI and machine learning and those sorts of things will augment human intuition and help us to develop great business and help us be smarter, help us be more efficient. And we need a strong plan for how we're going to do that. I close with a short clip, I think my favourite clip from Moneyball. So this is Brad Pitt. He plays Billy Beane, the general manager that I mentioned that devised this approach for Oakland Athletics. And this is his interaction with one of his senior staff members who's talking and really pissed off about this statistical method that he's trying to roll out. And it really shows the challenges that we all have in our businesses about driving a cultural mindset and how people can struggle to do that.
You're unhappy, Grady. Why?
Wow. May I speak candidly?
Sure, go ahead.
Major League Baseball and its fans, they're going to be more than happy to throw you and Google Boy under the bus if you keep doing what you're doing here. You don't put a team together with a computer, Billy.
No?
No. Baseball isn't just numbers. It's not science. If it was, then anybody could do what we're doing, but they can't because they don't know what we know. They don't have our experience and they don't have our intuition.
Okay.
Billy, you got a kid in there that's got a degree in economics from Yale. You got a scout here with 29 years of baseball experience. You're listening to the wrong one. Now, there are intangibles that only baseball people understand. You're discounting what scouts have done for 150 years, even yourself?
Adapt or die.
So, build a business, customer, product strategy guided by data and a culture to support that. Find what your Moneyball moment is. I'll leave you with that. I make no apology for this session being not about technology or really even about data. And that's on purpose, and it's how we believe you should be approaching the topic of data strategy and in making a difference in the pace and outcomes that you try and drive. I've been Jason Foster. I'm the founder and CEO of Cynozure. We're a people-powered data and analytics strategy organization helping to create data-guided organizations. Thank you.